Welcome back, everyone, to this Week 12 edition of Bruce Monnin's Computer Points Podcast. I am Bruce Monnin, your host, reporting from our studio in Minster, Ohio. Checking in from the greater Cincinnati area, home of those less than impressive 5-4 Cincinnati Bearcats last week. We have our co-host, executive producer, and chief researcher, Rebekah Monnin.
Happy to be here. Not sure if calling them less than impressive is going to motivate them to do any better, but hey, we can put that out in the universe.
A truly impressive part, of course, will be this Friday when the UC basketball team goes back into action with our own Rebekah Monnin playing in the pep band.
Yeah, they're really going to feel the impacts of the fully alumni pep band and how well practiced we are.
Nickel State will never know what hit them, I tell you.
They really won't. We won't know ourselves what's going on, so it'd be good to share the confusion.
After last week's episode, which was a little on the longish side, Rebekah and I have decided to tighten things up a little bit this week. So, just the two of us here, and we will look at the regional semifinal playoff matchups and give a brief overview of what Drew Pasteur's Fantastic 50 computer says the outcomes of these games may be. And, well, what the heck, Rebekah and I will give our own best guesses as to who may be victorious in each of these games.
No guarantee they'll be better than the computer guesses. In fact, they'll probably align most of the time. But I did miss in the previous years when we all put our guesses in and then was victorious or shamed by the statistics at the next week. So that's a bit of spice to the podcast.
Before we get to that, though, we did have one comment on our YouTube channel.
Oh, excellent.
I was excited. I received an email. It says, you have a comment. It's like, ooh.
You've got mail.
About our question of what to name a game where a team only scores 4 points from scoring 2 safeties. The suggestion that was sent to us was to call it the Evergreen Double in honor of the team who did it.
I will say it's catchy. It flows off the tongue very well. I think it's a great candidate.
I personally was undecided whether it should be named after the team who caused the 2 safeties and scored the 4 points but lost the game, which was Evergreen, or so we name it after the team who suffered both safeties but still won, which would be Patrick Henry in this case. I thought Patrick Henry at first, but the more I thought about it, I said, no, I think our listener may have had the right idea there. I think it has to be the team that caused the safety, don't you?
I would think so. The ones who scored the points. Absolutely. That and
okay.
Patrick Henry double does not roll off the tongue.
Patrick Henry double. No, not really. Sounds like some sort of Revolutionary War movie and the actor has a stand-in.
Yep, a stunt double. Absolutely. No, I'm definitely leaning towards the Evergreen double.
You know, speaking of actors, I did a little research. The only NFL player to record 2 safeties in a game was back in 1973, and by the player was Fred Dryer. Now, I didn't remember Fred Dryer as a football player, but I did know that he was the star of the TV detective show Hunter after his NFL career was over, and a guest star on, I think, about 4 Cheers episodes also. And it turns out I didn't remember anything about the show Hunter except for the fact that he always had a really crappy car and things would fall off of it all the time, like his door handle when he would go to get in and stuff like that. But I don't know if calling it the Fred Dryer is a real catchy thing. Not as good as the Evergreen Double.
I would agree. I think that's Evergreen Double is the winner here. Fred Dryer's done a significant amount more than just those 2 things.
I just saw him on an NCIS episode a year or 2 ago.
I was going to call that one out. He also had a guest spot on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, not a huge name actor, but it seems like he's got pretty consistent work. Good for him.
That's what happens when you cause 2 safeties in a game. You get an acting career out.
Apparently. Yeah. So we'll keep that in mind for the next time we see a game with two safeties, but judging by the frequency of it so far, we might have to keep doing the podcast for about 30 years for it to happen again.
Ooh, let's see. Yesterday was my birthday, and I turned 30 years. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Something
The
to
old
hold out for there, Dad.
89-year-old doing the podcasting. I might still be doing stats when I'm 89, but
You might.
if I can climb those steps up to the press box.
They might have installed an elevator by then.
Ooh, yeah, that would be great. And
All it would take would be one very generous and specific donation.
I guess I could do that if I was generous or specific.
Yeah, that's two things you would need to be. Anyway, I'm glad we had that
Anyway,
feedback on the double safety. We'll be putting it in the history books.
always nice to hear from our listeners.
Absolutely. Should we give them what
Okay,
they came here for, Dad?
all right, let's get started on some games here, huh?
Let's do
Is
it.
that what they came? Is that what they came for?
I assume so, but we have had several comments on the life catching up and banter back and forth being more of an appeal than the actual scores. So, up to the listeners, really. We'll give it to them anyway.
Well, we are going to start on a down note.
Oh no.
Our first team here is now out of the playoffs, unfortunately. In Division Three, Region 10, we had the 6 seed Defiance was playing the 3 seed Cleveland Benedictine.
Mm,
Defiance was a 27-point underdog, so it was going to be tough. Cleveland Benedictine beat them 28-6. So it was a game, but they were underdogs, and that's the way it turned out. So unfortunately, our coverage of the Defiance Bulldogs is pretty much at an end.
they beat the spread though for that
Yes, they did.
hometown bar betting league.
And I suddenly remembered where I'd seen Cleveland Benedictine before when I used to go to the state championship games. It was not that unusual for them to be there, actually. So that is
Hmm.
a historically good team.
I feel like we've talked about them in the past, but who's to say? I'd have to dig up the old transcripts for that. We'd have to write old transcripts for that.
We have some of the old files. I actually went to look one up to prepare for this week's podcast. And it turned out I had accidentally written over the next week's podcast on top of the old one and lost. It's the only one I was missing from last year.
The lost episode.
I could listen to the actual audio file, but that seemed like a
Mhm.
lot of work for what small thing I was trying to look up at the time.
Oh, a real peek behind the curtain for our listeners. All
Okay,
right.
before we move on here, it's time for our two scores of the week.
Scores of the week.
Oh, wow, already. Early podcast. Let's go.
The first one is from outside our coverage area. Fort Fry beat Waterford 29-26. Okay, now this
And
is going
why
to take a
is
little.
that a score of the week?
It's more because of what happened at the end of the game to end up with this score.
Okay.
This sounds like a game that would be fun to see the end of.
Sure. Okay.
So, Fort Fry scores a touchdown with 2 minutes remaining to go up 29-17. And the ensuing kickoff, it is returned 75 yards, not quite for a touchdown, but almost. So Waterford scores a touchdown with a minute 25 remaining to close the margin to 29-24. Waterford kicks an onside kick, but Fort Fry recovers it. So it seems like the game is over. However, on the third play, when Fort Fry is taking a knee to run out the clock, somehow one of their players was called for a personal foul, which stopped the clock and moved them back 15 yards at the same time.
Okay.
So now they have a choice. They could either try a punt, and we remember some big game last year where a team lost the game having a punt blocked in the last couple of seconds. Some Wapakoneta game, if I remember right. So this team instead decided to do the thing where the quarterback runs around for a while and eventually runs out the back of the end zone to take a safety. So now they're only up by 3 points, 29-26, with 23 seconds left.
Oh my gosh.
When they do the free kick after the safety, Waterford returns it all the way to the Fort Fry 10-yard line with 13 seconds remaining. So with 13 seconds left, they have a chance to go 10 yards for the victory.
Oh.
Unfortunately, the drama kind of died as they threw an interception on the next play to end the game. Or fortunately, depending on what side you're rooting for.
Yeah, I see why you picked it now. That's a heck of a last minute and a half.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that game show up on my television here on WOSN to see the end of that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing they're not a close region to WSN's coverage zone.
No, that would not be. Nope.
Although, hold on.
Okay.
Fort Fry and Waterford are like 2 miles away from each other. They are across the river from each other in southeastern Ohio. That has got to be like the biggest rivalry, regional playoff game of the year at the very least. Like, dang, I think their football fields have to be like 4 blocks apart looking at this map.
They could share one set of goalposts. It could be at the end of each field.
Could be. Anyway, heck of a score of the week. Good job, Dad.
Thank you. For our second score, we'll stay closer to home here. St. Mary's 16, Tip City Tippecanoe 14. So Tippecanoe was undefeated, the number 1 seed in this region. St. Mary's, the number 8 seed. Once again, St. Mary's pretty much runs the ball most of the time. However, they trailed most of this game. At the end, they kicked a 25-yard field goal with 9 seconds remaining.
Oh,
They had been down 14-13, kicked the 25-yarder for the win. Earlier in the game, Tip City missed a 26-yard field goal when they mishandled the snap. So if they'd have made that, St. Mary's would have had to try the desperation tosser for a touchdown.
mm-hmm.
Since they did not, the St. Mary's kicker put it right through the uprights. St. Mary's moves on. We have two WBL teams still alive in the next region we're going to talk about.
Neat. All right, very cool. That was a weird sound I made with my mouth, but still cool.
Time to start getting your prediction game in gear here, Rebekah.
Let's do it. Let's buckle in.
Division 3, Region 12. We'll start with the number 2 seed, 12-0, undefeated Wapakoneta, playing the number 3 seed, 11-1 Bellbrook. Last week, Wapakoneta was a 27-point favorite over Wilmington, won the game 48-12. Bellbrook defeated Cincinnati Archbishop McNicholas 24-21 in a tight game last. The computer says Wapakoneta is a 14-point favorite over Bellbrook in this game.
Okay.
Now, I found one common opponent. They both played 4-7 Franklin. Wapakoneta beat them 48-7 in the first round of the playoffs. Bellbrook beat Franklin 31-0 in week 7. So both teams very successful. Doesn't tell us a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. It seems like a pretty even matchup, except for maybe the point differential in the last game. But, I mean, I'm going to go with the computer and the hometown pride, obviously, I think.
We have both a team we cover who is favored by the computer and has the higher seed. It's kind of hard to go against for me unless I have a compelling reason, and I don't see a compelling reason.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like
Wapakoneta is playing really well. Their quarterback is really something, and I just heard this week, by the way, I was a little worried. They had a tough Week 10 game against Salina, and I always say, well, don't put too much onto those Week 10 games. But I also heard that the Wapakoneta quarterback was in the hospital with an illness earlier in the day before that game.
And still made it out to the
played
game?
the game.
Dang.
Yes, so he may not have been at 100% for that game.
Yeah, I don't have any insider knowledge that would sway that one way or the other, so I'm gonna go with Wapak for that pick.
We have 2 Wampawks there. We'll keep track of whether the higher seeded team, due to the computer points, wins or not, and with the computer says. So that's 4 picks across the board for Wapakoneta in that game. Our second game in this region. So if Wapak wins, they will be playing the winner of this game. We have the 4 seed, undefeated 12-0 London, playing against the 8 seed, 10-2 St. Mary's. Last week, London defeated 6-6 Chaminade Julienne, 24-12.
Okay.
St. Mary's, as we mentioned, they were actually 11-point underdogs against Tip City in that game, for winning 16-14 to knock them out of the postseason. The computer says it likes the undefeated team, London, by 11 points in this game. So let's see what other notes I may have here. London won their 10 regular season games by an average score of 55-3.
Okay.
But their 2 playoff games, they have won by a score of 32-13, a little closer. Maybe they weren't overly challenged in the regular season. Here comes the first pick that gets tough.
Yeah, we didn't hold it out very long, did we? I like an underdog. I like St. Mary's. I'm going to pick them. I think maybe they've got a little bit more experience with adversity than London does. I think maybe they do another underdog win. That'd be exciting.
I am also going to go with St. Mary's. I'm a little concerned about how good London may be. I don't know how much they'll do it. I know the St. Mary's coach loves the running game, but I keep hearing more and more what a good passer the St. Mary's quarterback is. So if they need it, they probably have a passing game they can pull out.
Remind me of the podcast I was on last week. Is this team that had like only running games and then pulled out a Hail Mary at the end of a couple weeks ago's game for the victory?
They're not quite that bad, but they mostly run the ball all the time, but they threw like a 40-yard pass at the end of the game for the win. Yes.
Gotcha. It's intriguing. It's very intriguing. All right. Comfortable with that.
Okay, we're moving down to Division 4, Region 14 next. First, we had our 10 seed Ottawa Glandorf. They were a 22-point underdog to Shelby last week, and they lost, but only 26-14. So the Whippets move on, but our Ottawa Glandorf Titans are done for the season.
I think the Whippets are my favorite for the whole region, just because they're Whippets.
We do, however, have one game in this region. The 13 seed, 7-5 Napoleon, still alive. They face the number 1 seed, 11-1 Sandusky Perkins. And I don't know if you have that in any notes anywhere, but I think we might have even mentioned Sandusky Perkins in one of our preseason shows as a team to maybe watch out for winning this region.
I only have notes on teams that we covered, so I did not capture that one.
No, all right.
Maybe a learning for future note-taking.
We can always claim that we said that. All right.
Sure. As we mentioned, we're not on top of the transcripts.
Last week, the computer said Napoleon was an 8-point favorite against Bay Village Bay. Napoleon won 28-0. A solid shutout victory.
Real disappointment for the Bay Leaves.
Yep. The computer says Napoleon is not an 8-point favorite this week. This week it says that the Wildcats are a 30-point underdog. The computer loves Sandusky Perkins.
With good reason, I would think.
I found a little intriguing here. Napoleon only shut out one opponent in the regular season, but they have held both of their playoff opponents scoreless. So the defense really stepping it up here come postseason time. Perkins has scored at least 28 points in their 11 wins. They were held to 14 points in their loss to undefeated Milan Edison during the season. So the key for Napoleon might be that defense. If you could hold Perkins down to about 2-3 touchdowns, they have a shot.
Hopefully their coaches are drilling down on that strategy.
I am saying they have a shot, but I'm picking Perkins. So
I think I am as well.
I said something in preseason, and I'm sticking with it.
30 points is a hard gap to overcome, gotta say.
Yeah. I don't believe the computer knows and tells all even close. 30 points, it's telling me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
We move into Division 5, Region 18. We have number 2, undefeated 12-0 Liberty Center playing against the third-seeded 12-0 Oak Harbor. The battle of the unbeatens here. Last week, Liberty Center was an 18-point favorite in what we dubbed the Liberty Bowl against Liberty Benton. Liberty Center won that game 35-0. They seem like they are focused on maybe making sure they get back to that state title game and trying to win it this year.
Absolutely.
Oak Harbor did fine last week also. They defeated 10-2 LaGrange Keystone 35-7. The computer says Liberty Center, a 12-point favorite over Oak Harbor. So the computer still likes the Tigers of Liberty Center. Both teams have one common opponent, 5-6 Tontogany Otsego. Rebekah's smiling. She knows I love Tontogany.
You really do love saying that town name. It's a fun little sign to drive by up in northern Ohio.
Anyway, when Liberty Center played Otsego, they won 37-7 back in week 3. Oak Harbor beat Otsego 31-0 in week 7. So both teams won by about 30 points. We're not getting any help here at all, Rebekah.
That's okay. We've got bias towards Liberty Center, and I'm going to lean into it pretty hard.
Yeah, there's no way I'm picking against the Tigers until
No.
it looks a lot more desperate than this game. That's for sure.
Although we've got a friend who had some experience in Oak Harbor. Did he ever say if they were a dynasty football team full of strong potential, or is it kind of...
They were pretty good most of the time he was there. When he left, he kind of took to rooting against him because he wasn't happy with some of the other adults in the town. Nothing against the kids.
Great. Good stuff.
So that's some knowledge of Oak Harbor.
And this was what, like 10 years ago? Longer?
Or more, yes.
So
I was there once or twice in that time frame, but that was a long time. And I saw one playoff football game of theirs. Who were they playing? It might have been Coldwater.
Either way, I'm backing the Tigers. And I think you are too.
I am too. We're going to have to disagree sometime just for the sake of the podcast.
We really do need to. I'll disagree on the next game. How about that?
Are you sure?
I think so. I'm looking at it.
All right.
I think it's a tight one.
In Region 20 of Division 5, we have the second seed, 11-1 West Liberty Salem, playing the third seed, 9-3 Waynesville. Now, this is a region I've already lost the two teams I thought were going to win it. First, I thought Versailles was favored, and they lose in week 1. Then I thought Lima Bath was favored, and they lose in week 2. So now...
the region of unpredictability.
The computers like this Waynesville team now as the best remaining team in the region. We'll see whether we agree or not. Last week, West Liberty Salem was a 15-point favorite over Miami East. They won 62-28.
Ooh.
To end the Vikings playoff run. 62 is a lot of points in the second round of the playoffs.
62 is a lot of points, yeah. Any round, really.
Let's see. Last week, Waynesville, they faced 6-6 Cincinnati Madeira and defeated them 55-6. Let's see. What's next? The computer says Waynesville, a 13-point favorite over West Liberty Salem. So let's see what my research says. It says there are no common opponents between these teams. West Liberty Salem has averaged 38 points per game. So not a fluke last week. Waynesville's defense gave up a lot of points early in the season, but only one touchdown per game in the 2 playoff games so far. My opinion is West Liberty's going to score in this game. The question is, if they gave up 28 points last game, how many are they going to give up to what is supposedly a better team?
I think this one's a real toss-up. Instinctually, I'm going West Liberty because they've got the scores and the history, but Waynesville's got a good run going, and the computer seems to like them.
I'll write mine down while you're thinking, and then that way I'm not...
Oh, we're being secretive? I fully am prepared to go either way, and I'm gonna... I think it's a real toss-up of a game. I really do.
Who you picking?
I don't want to agree with you.
Oh,
Oh
you'll
boy.
get more chances.
Okay. Gosh. I think Waynesville's got the defense locked in now, and I think they're going to hold them down. I don't know if they'll hold them down
That's
to winning, but I think they're going to hold them down. So I'm going to pick them and see how it
that's two
goes.
votes for Waynesville. So yes, we shall.
Is that
The
what
winner
you're
of that
going with
game,
too?
that's who I went with also. Yes.
Oh boy, we're not doing good at this interesting results thing.
Well, the winner of that game, whomever it shall be, faces the winner of number 5 seeded 10-2 Indian Lake playing the top seed 12-0 Jamestown Greenview. So last week, Indian Lake, a 7-point underdog to Preble Shawnee, but they scored the 28-14 upset to knock Preble Shawnee out of the playoffs. I believe that's the second playoff game in a row where they were a underdog, according to Drew Pasteur's Fantastic 50 computer.
Hmm.
Jamestown Greenview, on the other hand, they were a 4-point underdog to Lima Bath. I was big on Lima Bath, but Greenview won 28-23. So Bath's attempt to win the region as the number 9 seed has ended last week. The computer says Jamestown Greenview is an 8-point favorite and that Indian Lake is the underdog for the third playoff game in a row. My
Hmm.
pick is in.
Oh, why do you have to do this to me?
So I want your real pick. I don't want you just picking against me. Oh, by the way, both
But
teams
it's fun
played
to pick
3-8.
against you.
By the way, both teams played 3-8. St. Paris Graham. I bet you can tell where this is going. Well, maybe not. Indian Lake only won 13-7, but it was in that hurricane week 6. Greenview, well, they only won 27-6 to open the playoffs. Graham had a good effort against both
Mm-mm.
teams, even though they came out on the losing end.
So on one hand, I think Indy Lake's comfortable as an underdog as much as anyone can be, and I think they could do it again. On the other hand, there's only so long you can keep upsetting the odds. It's going to come to an end at some point. And the computer says Greenview, but not by a ton. So
Well, just 8 points.
I'm gonna lean towards Indian Lake this time.
Oh, and that's both of us again in this game.
Gosh, darn it. It's like I only have the information you have.
I think that may be true.
And also we have similar thought processes.
We're moving down to Division 6 next. In Region 22, we have the 2 seed, 11-1 Bluffton against the 3 seed, 10-1 Toledo Ottawa Hills. Last week, Bluffton was a 13-point favorite over Huron. They won 35-0, blew away that point spread. Ottawa Hills was a 22-point favorite to beat Sherwood Fairview, and they beat them 45-20. So about as expected, I guess, knocked our team Sherwood Fairview out of the playoffs. The computer says Bluffton is an 11-point favorite over Ottawa Hills in this game. I see no common opponents. Since they lost to Gibsonburg to open the season, Ottawa Hills has scored 37 or more points in every game. Bluffton has had their 3 lowest offensive outputs the last 3 games they've played. And when you consider they scored 35 last week, and that's one of their 3 lowest offensive outputs of the season, until they were really putting the points up for the last 3 weeks. So that would have been the Columbus Grove game and 2 playoff games. Offense is down a little bit. Not real surprising. What's your thoughts, Rebekah?
Not super cohesive. I think I'm just gonna gut check pick Ottawa Hills. They've got a lot of points in their favor. But also Bluffton like really blew out the estimate from what they thought they would do last week. I'm gonna stick with Ottawa Hills. I think they can do it.
All right. Bluffton, that's been one of those teams, at least their online fans seem to have been very confident all year long. Took a bit of a knocking down against Columbus Grove.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Bluffton's back. They know there's no Columbus Grove waiting for them in the playoffs. They're looking to make a long run here. So I'm taking
That is a
Bluffton.
fair point. All right, cool.
Now, however, I may not like Bluffton so much next week if they survive this one.
No?
Let's see here. Our next game in this region, we have the 4 seed, 10-2, Patrick Henry against the top seeded, undefeated, 12-0, Hopewell Loudon Chieftains.
Wow.
I think
Wonder which way you're swaying.
last week, Patrick Henry was a 24-point favorite over Cary. We thought that might be tighter maybe than the 24 points. Patrick Henry won exactly 24-0. The computer says Patrick Henry is an 11-point favorite over Hopewell Loudon, who beat
Really?
Attic. Yeah, they beat Attica Seneca East 34-7 last week. So it sure looks like an impressive win for the undefeated Hopewell Loudon team. I'm not going to make you wait this time because I can see you're deep in thought. This is where I think, of course, it failed me of Lima Bath last week, but Patrick Henry's one of those smallest teams in their conference who've been playing bigger teams all year. And I always say this is the time when that pays off. Computer likes
Really?
Patrick Henry. I'm going with Patrick Henry.
The way you were talking at the beginning, it really made it sound like Hopewell Loudon was the end all be all.
Well, it's easy to say that when they're undefeated, right?
It is easy to say that when they're undefeated. No, I was deep in thought because I was trying to game the game and figure out what you were going to pick, and I picked incorrectly. So you tricked me. I am not a poker expert. I'm still going to back up the undefeated. I think they've got momentum, and I don't see them slowing down. Although that week 1 game was tight. Oh, never mind. That was week 1 of the season, not the playoffs. I'm saying things that we haven't said out loud. Yep, I'm going to stick with Hopewell.
Yeah, I gotta say, I forgot to give you all the facts here.
Thankfully, I can read them in our script.
Okay. Well, I'll give it to our listeners then.
Excellent.
Both teams beat 6-6 Cary, by the way. Hopewell Loudon won 27-22 in week 1 of the season. Patrick Henry won 24-0 last week. Maybe that's where my Patrick Henry thought came from. And that was the only game Hopewell Loudon has given up more than 2 touchdowns all season. So the defense clamped down after which game was that? Week 1. In our other Division 6 region, Region 24, we have the top seed, 10-1 Coldwater, facing the 5th seed, 10-2 St. Bernard Elmwood Place. Last week, Coldwater was a 41-point favorite over Springfield Northeastern, and they won 56-7. Elmwood Place defeated 8-4 Portsmouth West, 49-21 to move on to this game. The computer says Coldwater is a 43-point favorite this week. I find no common opponents. Elmwood Place is averaging about 50 points per game their last 5 games. Other than their 35-0 loss to Marion Local, Coldwater has averaged giving up only 9 points per game. Personally, I look at this and I say this falls under my old small division Cincinnati school, who you haven't hardly heard of, and I have no idea what their mascot might even be.
Yep.
And the computer says they're a 43-point underdog, and they're playing a MAC team.
Yeah.
My pick is in the bank for Coldwater.
Yeah, this one's not too dramatic on my end either. I'm going Coldwater. I would need to see something a lot more impressive to pick against a MAC team.
Yeah, and that's not it. Our other game in this region, the 3rd seed, 8-3 Anna, is playing the number 2 seed, 11-1 Cincinnati Country Day. So another smaller Cincinnati school. This one is a private school, not a public, however. Kind of messes that theory up. They're also seeded higher than Anna. Anna was a 33-point favorite over Cincinnati Purcell Marion last week, and they won 61-14. So maybe Anna doesn't mind seeing another Cincinnati team come up on their path through the playoffs here. The computer says Anna is a 31-point favorite over Country Day. So once again, no common opponents here. Country Day did beat St. Bernard Elmwood Place 40-26 in week 10. So I'm thinking Anna may have the slightly tougher opponent here than Coldwater had in the previous game. Country Day also scores a lot, averaging 45 points a game. However, they also give up about 21 points a game, which is good news for that Anna offense that's been putting the points on the board lately. So maybe a little bit not as obvious, but we still basically have the same MAC versus Cincinnati team in a small division here. I'm taking Anna myself.
Yeah, me as well. I know Country Day pretty well from my normal commutes and also from I think they show up quite a bit in our track and cross country competitions. But I'm not super optimistic about their chances against Anna.
Seen Cincinnati Country Day and Cincinnati Summit Country Day pop up in the playoffs quite a few times through the years from either Region 24, Region 28, down in the lower side schools, making it out of the Cincinnati area into the playoffs. So they're not exactly a newbie to the playoffs here. I'm sticking with Anna. And before we hit Division 7, it's time for our Team of the Week, Rebekah.
Team of the Week. Ba, ba, ba. Our team never seems so good. So good, so good, so good. Team of the Week. Ba, ba, ba. We believed we always would.
Team of the week. All right. Let's do it.
We had several choices here. We had St. Mary's pulling off another late game victory. We had Delphi St. John's for being the lowest seeded team remaining in the playoffs across the state. However, this episode's Team of the Week goes to the Leipzig Vikings. The number 11 seed defeated number 3 Gibsonburg 18-16 last week, despite being an 18-point underdog in the game. And what's kind of intriguing about this, Leipzig will be playing Delphi St. John's this week in what I think is going to be a really intriguing game. The 2 lowest seeds that we follow remaining have to play each other. So as we were discussing in the pre-podcast meeting, you can either look at that as only one can possibly survive another week, or at least one of them survives another week.
I'm choosing to think about it in the latter. It's so fun we get to see our underdog teams going even further, no matter which one comes out of it.
And since we just said that, I moved that one up to the first game we cover in Division 7, Region 26.
Ooh.
We have the number 11 seed, 8-4 Leipzig, playing the 15 seed, 5-7 Delphi St. John's, the poster boy for everyone who believes that 16 teams should get into the playoffs instead of 8 per region. Last week, as we mentioned, Leipzig was an 18-point underdog against Gibsonburg before winning 18-16. Delphi St. John's was actually favored by 1 point by the computer to upset Tiffin Calvert. The Blue Jays said 1 point, ha! And they won 27-0. This week, Rebekah, Delphi St. John's is listed as a 5-point favorite to cause what, according to the seedings, would be an upset in this game.
5-point favorite.
Let's see, what else do we have here? No common opponents, which kind of surprised me. Delphus and Leipzig are not that far apart, actually.
They're really
as
not.
the crow flies. Leipzig has been the lower seed and the underdog in both of their playoff games and triumphed in both. St. John's has been the lower seed and the favorite in both of their playoff games and triumphed in both. So they're both in the exact same situation this week. One goes 3 for 3, one goes 2-1. By the way, Leipzig's last 4 games have been 1-score games. They're used to the tight game. And last week's 27-point victory was the largest Delphi St. John's has had since week 1 when they defeated Sidney Lehman. And if you remember right, that week 1 win is why St. John's made it into the playoffs, as Lehman went on to go 9-1, 8-2, something like that.
Something like that. Fascinating. I would be thrilled if either of them won, which will happen. I think I'm
By the
gonna
way,
lean
quick
back. Yeah, what you got?
update. Lehman and did end up hating too.
Okay. Good to know. I'm glad we checked. I think I'm gonna pick Leipzig, both for their seeding, but also because of a fun little note I have in my document that says Leipzig was Van's underdog team of the year, and we should expect great things. So as much as I'd love Delphus to keep going, I really want that prophecy to hold true.
Yeah, I remember the Van note there too. But in the end, I see Mac. I'm going Delta St. John's. So,
Fair and reasonable.
unfortunately, Delta St. John's was the one MAC team I did not witness in person this year. So I really don't know. I don't think I've even seen them on television since week 1, maybe.
Wow. You're
So,
gonna have to catch this
yeah.
game.
Yeah, you would think this one would be televised. I should be able to
You
see this
would
one.
think.
Yeah. This looks like a WOSN special, baby.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if we even need to talk about the next game. I mean, we will, but the debate's not gonna be super strong, I don't think.
No, in our opinion, coming up, we'll go through all the facts, but I'm sure we're both saying, can't wait to see the winner of that Delphus Lipsic game play. Number 1, 12-0 Columbus Grove the next week.
Yeah.
First, Columbus Grove has to survive against the 4th seeded 10-2 Sycamore Mohawk. Last week, Columbus Grove was a 30-point favorite over Lima Central Catholic and won 38-6 to knock the Thunderbirds out of the playoffs. I don't think I mentioned it last week because I'd only heard it from 1 or 2 sources, but I heard it from a lot more afterwards. Apparently, there was a little bit of dissension among the players and between the players and the coaches on that LCC team leading up to the game last week. So I was heavily expecting that big Columbus Grove win, and they delivered. Let's see, last week, Sycamore Mohawk was a 4-point favorite, and they won 20-13 to knock Macomb out of the postseason. Another one of Van Wright's favorite teams. So Macomb is out. The computer says Columbus Grove should stay in as a 32-point favorite in this game. Once again, and I'm really surprised by this trend. No common opponents here. I really thought by now we would have more common opponents in these games. Mohawk has had a lot of close games these last few weeks. Columbus Grove only had one close game all season, a 28-20 win over LCC, which they answered by beating LCC 38-6 last week. So they made up for that one close game. Peter doesn't think this one will be close. I don't think this one will be close. And I have a feeling Rebekah does not either.
I sure don't.
And that gets us into Region 28. Speaking of games, I expect that Rebekah will agree with myself and the computer on very handily. We'll start with top seeded, undefeated Marion Local against number 4, 11-1 Ansonia. Marion Local was a 49-point favorite, and they won 56-14 to knock Tri-Village out of the playoffs. By the way, that 14 points Tri-Village scored was double the total number of points Marion Local gave up to Minster and Coldwater combined. I hear they have quite the quarterback at Tri-Village who's still quite young, and they expect to be even better the next couple years. So keep that in the back of your mind for future years. Watch out for Tri-Village. Last week, Ansonia was a 13-point favorite. They defeated Sidney Lehman 60-20 to knock the Cavaliers out of the postseason. So quite the game for Ansonia last week. Let's see. What do we say here? The computer says it stops. It will not make anyone more than a 49-point favorite, but it only has Marion Local as a 42-point favorite this week. So
Only 42. They're
44.
slipping.
The computer thinks this will be a tighter one for Marion Local.
Oof, 44.
Both teams have played Tri-Village, and Sonia won 34-28 in week 5. Marion Local won 56-14 last week. And Sonia's actually had a lot of experience running into MAC teams in the playoffs the last couple of years. They gave eventual state champions from New Bremen their toughest playoff challenge in 2022, losing 26-22. Last year, the Tigers beat St. Henry 20-13 before losing to Marion Local 48-0. I have the Flyers myself.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been 2 games back to back that, for better or for worse, we've got our preconceived notions set. There are records in place. I don't
We're
see
not
them
changing
losing
them.
just yet. No.
And our next game is one of those classic MAC versus small school Cincinnati over small Cincinnati school, small division Cincinnati school games.
Yeah.
Something like that. The 2 seed 10-2 Minster faces the 3 seed 9-2 Cincinnati College Prep. Last week, Minster was a 17-point favorite over St. Henry, and they ended the Redskins season 42-14 in what I believe I described in the paper as a gritty game, which is another way of saying it wasn't the smoothest. There's a lot of penalties, a
Oh,
few turnovers. It was a
oh,
gritty game. The defenses played hard.
oh, good for them.
Last week, College Prep was a 21-point underdog, but they still removed Fort Laramie from the postseason with an
Ooh.
18-7 victory. That was one that every time the scores came in, you heard the old oohs and ahs from the crowd when they were announced at the Minster game. It's like, ooh, we thought we were playing Fort Laramie next week. The computer says Minster is a 39-point favorite in this game. The one common opponent is, of course, Fort Laramie. Minster won 49-21 way back in week 1. College Prep won 18-7 last week. So that would favor Minster to some extent. College Prep has averaged 16 points per game in their last 4 matchups against teams with a 50-50 record or better. Minster's only averaged 19 points in the last 4 such games. So that would make you think they're pretty similar. If you look a little closer, I would rank Minster's 4 opponents as a lot better than College Prep's 4 opponents. But since they don't play each other, we really don't know, do we?
We really can't say for sure.
Nope.
Hometown
Nope.
pride, though. I'm going Minster all the way.
Absolutely. As the official stats man for Minster, I either have to pick them or not pick the game. I pick them.
Good.
And it's an honest pick. I honestly believe they are the heavy, heavy favorite this week.
And as dedicated listeners will know, I never shy about leaning into the favoritism in these picks.
No, you don't. And that's a good thing.
Dad may need to be neutral sometimes. I don't.
I don't know. They might come to find you down there somewhere in Cincinnati.
Somewhere in Cincinnati, there's a lot of houses to look at.
Although not really in Cincinnati, but we can't say that. In this greater Cincinnati area.
I think I technically have a Cincinnati zip code.
Really? Yeah, you might. Yeah.
A hint for the listeners.
I think a lot of those, I would say villages, but they actually call them even more than that sometimes. Little cities down there have Cincinnati zip codes.
It's easier. Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, we shall finish with the 8-man football state championship game this week.
Ooh, already. Exciting.
We had 2 dominating performances last week. The top seed 10-0 Toledo Christian beat Holgate 49-0 in one semifinal. The number 2 seed 9-1 Sandusky St. Mary defeated Southington Chalker 41-6 in the other semifinal. So I think we have our top 2 teams made it to the championship game.
Yep. I think the playoff system worked pretty well.
Now, these 2 teams played each other just 3 weeks ago. Toledo Christian defeated Sandusky St. Mary 28-0 in that game. So I would say Toledo Christian is the favorite to defend their 8-man football state championship that they won last year. You want to give a pick on that one, Rebekah?
I think it's got to be Toledo Christian. They're pretty dominant.
I would have to agree with you. What was that our guest said last week? The Marion local of 8-man football?
Yeah.
He might be a touch premature on that, but it has a
Maybe a little
ring
bit.
to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
So shout out to Colin Foster for that nickname if it holds.
If it holds, it'll be up to us to hold it down.
Yeah, we might be responsible. That's true.
We just need to remember it.
By the way, the 8-man football state championship game is Saturday at 7 p.m. at Don Paul Stadium in Fremont.
Fremont.
Out
That's
comes
a
Google
late
Maps.
one. And I think you have plans that day.
I do have plans that day. I will not make it this year, unlike last year.
But Fremont seems like a nice central location for both teams. That
Yeah,
would make
sounds pretty
sense.
good to me.
Yeah.
And the site was picked over a month ago, so I guess they may have been able to predict what teams were going to make it back then. But
Either that or the whole region's kind of centralized up there in northern Ohio. It's probably a
it
good
is
bet
for the
either
most
way.
part. And I think they wanted to move the game a little farther towards the east for the
Yeah,
newer teams that joined up here recently. So Fremont it is this year.
Fremont it is.
In last year's title game, Toledo Christian defeated Holgate 46-6. Now they had only defeated Holgate 20-14 in the regular season last year, but they really turned it on in that title game, and it really was a show they put on,
Absolutely. Very
and
entertaining.
the Holgate fans were not expecting that. They thought they had a great shot at the state title last year. So even though the final result was a 40-point game, it was not expected to be that way. Anyway, we'll see if the people at Fremont can do as can perform as well as the host at Liberty Center last year. I'm sure we'll get some reports from the game. We'll find out how it went. Maybe we could even get the winning coach on in a couple of weeks for a podcast here. We'll give it a shot.
That would be exciting.
And that wraps up our preview of the region semifinal round, Rebekah.
Woo woo. We did it. Now with the
Next week, we'll
conclusion
try to
of
bring
that,
someone else in. Oh, so I said next week, we'll try to bring someone else in who might have a slightly different opinion on some of these games than Rebekah and
maybe someone who's working off of different facts than the ones that Dad put in front of me 5 minutes before we record.
I.
That's not his fault. That is my own for not having the time invested into pre-research as chief researcher.
Well, apparently, we do not have a specific question to ask of our listeners this week like we did last week.
We could make up one if we want engagement. Pick a team, see which one everyone has opinions on.
No,
Like
if you
our
have,
give
no,
one
here's what
specific
we're
in
going to
mind.
do, I think. If you would like to pick all these games and see how you do against the experts, if you send them to us, we will note how you did and report your results on next week's podcast along with our own.
If we get
You
enough
think anyone's
inputs,
brave enough to do that?
I think there's a couple who might. I think we'll have to set a threshold for if we get too many responses, we just do generally the audience thought this, or percentage of the audience that guessed correctly.
If we get too many responses, we'll just promote the best. How about
There
that?
we go. There you go. That's a good way to do it.
And by the way, the deadline will be the email, note, X note, whatever, must be received by before 7 p.m. Friday, before kickoff.
Otherwise, you'll know. I was going to say before recording time on Monday of next week, but I forgot that you'll
that
know
would be
the
bad.
results by then.
So, if you want in, let us know before then. We'll see how well you do. Rebekah, tell them where they need to send this stuff to.
Absolutely. If you would like to contribute to next week's podcast by inputting your own picks, or if you have any questions or comments, those can be sent to us by email at bdmonnin@nktelco.net or submitted on X to @BruceMonnin. You can also put your thoughts in the comment section of our YouTube page, and Dad will get a fun little email, and it'll make his week. It will. Outside of that, stop us in person, hand us a paper with all of your bets because we can't memorize them that well.
You'll find me in the press box at Sydney Friday night at the Minster Cincinnati College Prep game.
There you go. Or potentially at Bud's at 3:30 on Wednesday.
It's the plan.
That's the plan. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you can find your fine podcasts, such as Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, our YouTube channel. Still not Spotify. We'll get there someday. Just search for Bruce Monnin's Computer Points. Thank you very much.
And I can guarantee we shall return next week to preview the regional final round playoff games. I will not guarantee who will all be here other than myself. Most probably Rebekah, hopefully a
best.
guest, but those are not guaranteed. You're pretty close next week, right, Rebekah?
Yeah.
You're about a 90-some percent, 95? Yeah. We will return then, and until then, so long, everybody.